kind of initiated. We had the readings about this, but last week was our first official class on Jeremiah, and so we talked about how this message of judgment and hope is continues to ring out throughout the book of Jeremiah. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. Appreciate that. We talked about how the prophets are typically avoided. And do you guys remember what some of the reasons were that we said that sometimes the prophets kind of, as a book of literature or whatever, they get avoided?
Hard to understand.
Yeah, they can be very hard to understand. You guys remember any other reasons? They kind of deal directly with sin, don't they? And so sometimes that's a little bit uncomfortable for people to deal with, and so sometimes they get avoided strictly because people are like, I don't want to mess with that. So we mentioned that. We said that the prophetic literature typically has messages to Israel and Judah in particular, but that sometimes they're directed to the nations as well, and that they speak God's message to the people, like we just said there, typically His chosen people, but that God also speaks to the nations around Israel as well. And that by agreeing to be God's people, we agree to His way of living. And that God calls on us to return when we fall away, and we need to seek His heart again. So, just to kind of re-emphasize the point from last week, if I'm sick, and let's say David is my doctor, okay? We're going to say that David has finished his training. He's a very competent and very good doctor, and all of a sudden I'm stricken with blindness, and I can't see. And David comes up to me and says, Ted, you're not doing so well. Something's wrong. You need to come see me. And I say, no, I'm going to keep just walking around like this. What's going to eventually happen with me?
Well, you're going to run into a wall.
Yeah. What? Yeah, I'm going to run into stuff. Huh? Potentially, if I fall in the wrong hole, yeah, I could potentially die. So let's say something else happens. Somebody throws something else that goes wrong with me after the blindness. Yeah. Well, don't physically throw something at me, but just
you go deaf.
Deaf. Okay, so now I'm deaf. So now David has somehow managed to Helen Keller me, and he's now somehow speaking to me without being able to actually speak to me because I can't obviously hear him, and he can't sign language to me because I'm blind. But he's somehow communicating to me, Ted, you need to come in and see me because you're obviously not well, and we need to do something about this. And somehow I managed to tell him, well, I guess I can still speak. So I just go, no, I don't know exactly what you're telling me, but no, I'm not coming in, right? So now something else happens. Paralyzed, now I'm paralyzed, okay? So now David once again approaches me and says, Ted, and I don't know how he's telling me this at this point, but he's saying, Ted, there's obviously something terribly wrong with you. You need to come in and see me. I can help you. Please come in and see me. And I'm just going to go, no, I'm not going to do it, right? Is that logical?
No.
No, that's ridiculous. If you guys get sick, what do? Go to the doctor. Yeah. And if you get some kind of virus or whatever, they give you well, I guess they can't give you an antibiotic for a virus, but they just kind of basically give you some stuff to make it easier and say tough it out and move along. But if you've got something wrong, that there's antibiotics that they give you. If you gash your arm open, they'll bind it up and stitch you up and all that. But this is basically what we're talking about right here with Jerusalem during this time period. Okay? With God's people. Because they're consistently going through this process where God has said, okay, you're doing stuff that's completely inappropriate and unholy. You need to come back to me. And he keeps sending prophet after prophet to the people, telling them, please, this is not good. We saw all this kind of stuff when we went through the kings. They're going through and doing child sacrifices. They're sacrificing all kinds of foreign gods. They're getting involved in stuff internationally that they shouldn't be involved in. And God's saying, please, come back. And Israel's saying what? No. No, I won't. And it's completely ludicrous. But they continue to persist in this thing. And this is the thing, is that part of our human condition is, yes, we're going to get sick, but we go see a doctor. Part of our human condition is that we're going to sin, and God calls on us to return when that happens. And so when we fall away, we need to seek His heart again. And God's constantly reaching out to us, constantly calling on us, begging us, please return, come back. So, we've talked about this before, but when was sacrifice initiated? Yeah, because what happens? Adam, so let's go through the sequence. So Adam and Eve sin. What's the next thing that they do?
Put on clothes.
What kind of clothes? Leaves. And God says that's going to work?
Yeah.
No. What does He do? Kills an animal. All right. And so He has to cover over their offense through the death of an animal. Right. And so when the Israelites were supposed to sacrifice, how were they supposed to do it?
So,
Yep. And how specifically were they supposed to do it?
this was like hold it down.
Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. They probably did have to hold it down.
And then they confess their sins as they did this.
Yeah. So they're directly putting their hands on the animal. They're slitting the throat, or if it was a bird, I guess they have to wring the neck or something. I don't know exactly how that worked, but
They weren't allowed to run the neck, I'm sure. I'm not sure how they did it.
I don't remember. Yeah, but in any case, they had to be putting their hands on it and being an active part of it. Why? What was the purpose of making Israel actually be an active part of that process?
To make them realize that sin equals death.
Yeah, to make them realize the consequence for it. That yes, they're, in order for them to be covered of their sin, death was required. Something had to take the place of their sin. And so this action had to occur. So, with that in mind, let's see here. Kobe, mind coming up? I'm sorry. 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 All right, excellent. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Does it really feel like I'm apologizing to him?
No.
Like Kobe saying
That's a good point. Okay. I'm saying I'm sorry, but what do I keep doing?
Keep hitting.
Yeah. This is the exact point that we're seeing with what's going on in Israel and Judah at this point. And you can sit down, I think. Is that Israel is consistently sinning. They're constantly messing up, and yet throughout this entire thing, they're going, sorry. And then they go outside the temple walls, outside the city, and sacrifice their child. They go inside, they go to God, they offer their fellowship offering, say, oh God, here's my offering. And then they go up to the rooftop and they burn incense to a foreign god. They go back to the temple and say, oh God, accept my offering, and then they go throughout the city streets and, deal unjustly with each other. Go back to the temple. Sorry. Here's my offering. Go outside. Break somebody. Go back to the temple. This is the problem that's occurring in Jerusalem at this time. There's no heart change. They're completely missing the purpose of sacrifice. So, one question I want to ask you guys this morning, it's not on your sheet, but since Christ took on the ultimate sacrifice, how does that work for us today? How do we sacrifice how does sacrifice work for us today?
And the husband disobeys his wife.
I don't think that's sacrifice. I think that's
reaching.
sin.
Well, yeah, but still sounded good.
I think a lot of times we sacrifice things in order to do the right thing.
Okay. So giving up actions.
Yeah.
What kind of actions?
I don't know, like maybe one of your friends wants you to go with them, and you know you probably shouldn't. So instead of going with them and doing the wrong thing, you
Right.
They don't.
So let's say that before you've been baptized, you had an issue with gossip, and you're still hanging out with some of those people, and somebody comes up to you and goes, "Did you hear about Riley?" What are you gonna do?
Why are you gonna pick on me?
Because I picked on Kobe really bad just a little bit ago. So what are you gonna do?
I'm saying, no, what happened?
Yeah, you're either gonna address it, you should address it, and you're not gonna participate in it. Okay? There's all kinds of things that this is kind of what we talk about with the difference between worldly nature and godly nature is that we start to recognize that there are things in our lives that don't belong there, and we're giving those away. We're stopping that behavior. All right. So let's go ahead and read through Jeremiah 6. Let's go ahead and open up to that. Did anybody notice anything in chapters 2 through 5 this past week that you thought was interesting, or? No? All right.
What is it?
Jeremiah 6 is for this morning. All right. So we'll read through Jeremiah 6. We'll do, I think we can do 2 verses each this morning.
Y'all want to start on this side?
Huh?
They won't start on this side.
We're going to start on this side because I've picked on you 2 weeks in a row now because you kept on alternating like that. So we're going to start with Maddie here.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Why was the sound of trumpet? What is that word?
Tekoa.
Okay, and then the one right after Obed.
Hecarim.
Right.
All right.
Hecarim.
And that actually brings up a good point. If you can't really pronounce a word, either feel free to go, don't know, or just pronounce it to the best of your ability and move on.
I always do that part of things.
Eli the other day had a whole string of them. I felt bad for him.
Hey, Ted, tell them how you say Abimelech.
You can either say Abimelech or you can say Abimelech.
Eh.
In any case, the other thing I want to remind you guys of this morning is as you're reading through this, if you notice something, if the Spirit just kind of tugs at you on something, be paying attention for that and kind of focus in on that. And if you need to, if you haven't read yet, just kind of mark the verses that you're supposed to read on and just kind of go back and just keep focusing on that one that kind of caught your attention. All right, so starting with Maddie, here we go. First one.
Flee for safety, people of Benjamin. Flee from Jerusalem. Sound the trumpet in Tekoa. Raise the signal over Beth.
That work?
What?
That work?
For the disaster looms out of the north, even terrible destruction. I will destroy daughter Zion, so beautiful and delicate.
Shepherds with the flock shall come against her. They shall pitch their tents around her. They shall pasture in each in his place. Prepare war against her, and rise and let us attack at noon. Woe to us, for the day becomes for the shadow of the evening light.
So arise, let us attack at night and destroy the fortress. This is what the Lord Almighty said. Cut down the trees and stand chance against Jerusalem. This city must be punished, its building oppression.
As the world pours out its waters, so she pours out her rain. Violence and destruction is on you. Your sickness is ever fulfilled. Take warning, Jerusalem, for I will turn away from you and make you a desolate, so no one can live in it.
This is what the Lord Almighty says. Let them glean and remnant of Israel as
Thoroughly.
this is a really easy word. Thoroughly as a vine. Pass your hand over the branches again, like one gathering grapes. To whom can I speak and give warning? Who will listen to me? Their ears are closed, so they cannot hear. The word of the Lord is offensive to them. They find no pleasure in it.
But I am full of the wrath of the Lord, and I cannot forbid it. Pour it out on the children in the street, and on the young men gathered together. Both husband and wife will be caught in it, and the old and those weighed down with years. Their houses will be turned over to others, together with their fields and their wives, when I stretched out my hand against those who live in the land, declares the Lord.
From the least to the greatest, all the greedy for gain. Prophets and priests alike, all practice sight. They dress the wound of my people as though it is not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. Are they ashamed of their
loathsome conduct? No, they have no shame at all. They do not even know how to blush. So they will fall among women. They will be brought down by punishment. This is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look past the ancient paths, through the way, is and walk in, and you will find rest for your souls. But he said, do not look.
I set watchmen over you, saying, Pay attention to the sound of the trumpet. But they said, We will not pay attention. Therefore, hear, O nations, and know, O congregation, what will happen to them.
Hear you, earth, I am bringing disaster on this people, the fruit of their schemes, because they have not listened to my words and have rejected my law. What do I care about incense from Sheba or sweet promise from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable, your sacrifices do not please me.
Therefore, this is what the Lord says. I will put obstacles before this people. Parents and children alike will stumble over them. Neighbors and friends will perish. This is what the Lord says. Look, an army is coming from the land of the north. A great nation is being stirred up from the ends of the earth.
They are armed with bow and spear. They are cruel and show no mercy. They sound like the roaring sea as they ride on their horses. They come like men in battle formation to attack you, O daughter of Zion. We have heard reports about them, and our hands hang limp. Anguish has gripped us, pain like that of a woman in labor.
Do not go out to the fields or walk on the roads, for the enemy has a sword and there is terror on every side. Put on sackcloth, my people, and roll in ashes. Mourn with bitter wailing as for an only son, for suddenly the destroyer will come upon us.
I have made you a tester of metals, and my people for ore, that you may observe it and test their ways. They are all hardened rebels, going there to slaughter. They are bronze and iron. They are all at rest.
The bellows blow fiercely, the wheat is consumed by the fire. In vain the refining goes on, for the wicked are not removed. Reject silver, they are called, for the Lord has rejected them.
Okay. John. All right. So then, anything in particular catch your guys' attention in any of those?
Hold on, let me find it. Wait, okay, so they had to give up their houses to other people for some reason. Verse 12.
Verse 12. Okay. houses will be turned over to others, together with their fields and their wives, and I'll stretch out my hand against those who live in mine. Yeah. What what caught your attention about that? Verses 1 through 4. Okay. I mean, it sounds kind of harsh, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, but it's also what people do when they take over a city. They take the houses and the wives. It's what the conquerors do.
Yeah. But I mean, it's this process of, and this is something that we're going to see consistently throughout Jeremiah is, I mean, God speaks like crazy harsh against the people. And it's something that a lot of people have a hard time dealing with. It's just how bad the punishment gets. I mean, when you go into the historical records, I mean, the siege against Jerusalem gets so bad that people are like eating each other. That mothers are eating their own children. It's that bad. Yeah, it's messed up. And so it's this process of it's a really terrible situation. But we have to remember as we go through the text that it's a situation that the people put themselves in. God is consistently trying to reach out to them and say, please, stop. Stop. Don't do this. You're getting into some really bad territory here. And he's trying to reach out so hard. And in the end, the punishment has to come just like it had to come for the people of Canaan. Anything else that caught your guys' attention?
I have one.
Yeah.
Verse 15, it says, they do not even know how to blush. What does that mean?
Write this down. They do not even know how.
Oh, it means, I'm guessing, like they have no shame.
Exactly.
Yeah, 4 that says they have no shame at all.
Yeah.
Oh, so like they don't even like feel bad for something like
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, for some of them, yeah, they're still trying to act like they're doing okay or whatever and going to the temple. Some of them just don't even care. They're not even acting like they've done anything wrong. And this is something that we saw last week when we talked about this. That they're sitting here trying to claim, I haven't done anything. I don't know what you're doing. I didn't sin. And so yeah, they don't even know how. It's just beyond them. They're just so engrossed in their own sin.
Is he talking about the previous times he saved them before?
And this one right here?
Well, and is he talking about like past books and the history of the people, like in Judges, they continually.
I mean, I think it's kind of this issue of it's a constant thing. I mean, because like we saw already, in Judges, what was the constant thing that was said towards the end?
Every man turned to his own way.
Yeah, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. And so, I mean, Israel clearly, I mean, when you go through the Judges, I mean, it's a bad story through a lot of that anyways. And the end of Judges is just awful. I mean, you've got the story of the Levite and his concubine where he throws his concubine out to be raped. And then at the end of it, when she's dead, he chops up her body and sends it across to the people of the nation. And then he's acting like, see how terrible this thing is? It's like, you are a part of it. What are you talking about? You're not any better. And the only time that Israel really does a good job is when the king is actually doing a good job. When the king, the prophets, and the priests are all working together to guide the people, and the people accept what they're supposed to be doing. And you only really see that a couple times. You see it with Josiah the most. You saw it during King David's reign. And then there's like a handful of times when, yeah, they did a better job. But they still were terrible throughout the entire history. And so it's just this consistent issue of sin among God's people that's just so pervasive. Anything else that you guys?
I like verse 28, but is that talking about idols though? They are all hardened rebels going about to slander their bronze and iron and all that correctly.
No, it's still talking about Israel. I mean, it's basically saying, I mean, like they're not movable. They're not moving from their sin. That God is trying to mold them, to shape them, to try and put them in the fire to get them to do what's right, and they're just stubborn. Anybody else? This is good. Okay. One verse. What?
Sorry. Verse 19.
19?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where it says, "Hear, O earth, behold, I am raining disaster upon this people, the fruit of their devices, because they have not paid attention to my words. And as for my law, they have rejected it."
Okay. What about
stood
that?
out to me is just, it's like he's saying to the nations, because I'm pretty sure they're going to get by saying, "Hear, O earth." Obviously, he's not talking to the planet
Right.
as itself. He's saying, listen to me. This is what is happening to these people because they have rejected what I told them to do.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't
Okay.
reject me, because otherwise this is what will happen to you too.
Yeah. Some other verses. Verse 9 talks about, "Let them glean the remnant of Israel as thoroughly as a vine. Pass your hand over the branches again like one gathering grapes." When Israel did one passing through, were they supposed to go back and gather it again?
No.
No. We talked about that with the leaving the edges of the field, right? And so God's specifically saying, go back, do it again. This is a judgment type pronouncement here that God's going to have one judgment pass through, go back and do it again. And keep doing it until there's nothing left. Strip them bare, is what he's saying. Let's see, another one was verse 14, I think is what I have written down here. They dress the wound of the people as though we're not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. This is something that the prophets and the priests continuously try telling the people. You know, we're going back to the example from the beginning of having David as a doctor. You know, in the example that we gave, David was consistently telling me, "You need to get in here." You know, the example that's going on in Jerusalem is the doctors, instead of doing what they're supposed to do, the doctor is basically coming up to you and saying, "No, your eyesight's fine. You're hearing just great. Your body, nothing wrong with your body whatsoever." And that's the problem. I mean, the people should have known better to begin with, but the priests and the prophets weren't doing their role either. So the focus that we have for this morning is right here in verses 19 through 20. And Jeff read verse 19 there. And it says in 20, "What do I care about incense from Sheba or sweet calamus from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable. Your sacrifices do not please me." So there's two parts to this passage right here. And in this part right here, kind of like Jeff was already saying, speaking to the earth. If you guys remember from last week in kind of the introductory stuff, we said that there's a couple different types of narrative in the prophetic literature, and one of those is the courtroom setting. And this is basically what we see right here, is that God is approaching as judge, that he's bringing the earth as witness, that Jerusalem, that Israel, that his chosen people are the defendant, and he is pronouncing judgment on them. He is explaining what the guilt is and that the punishment is coming. And what's the punishment for? What did they do wrong? It's in this part right here.
They have rejected the law.
Yeah, exactly. They have not listened to my words and rejected my law. That it's not just a matter of, oh, they messed up and but they keep coming back to me. It's that they've heard the message and they're rejecting it. That they're consistently going through this and just completely rejecting it every time. And the second part is this right here. So who is he talking to in this part?
All the people in
Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Yeah. This people, Jerusalem, Judah, his chosen people. And so he's switching it from addressing the earth to his people. And he's specifically saying, what do I care? You're offering all these sacrifices, but just like we already talked about, they're not really apologetic about it. Their heart really isn't changed. They're offering these sacrifices with nothing, no attempt to actually try and change their heart. The sacrifice was to cover over our sins so that we could once again enter God's presence, and they clearly don't care. And so that's the issue that we're seeing. So for this morning, being God's people means more than going through the motions. Going to church, baptism, service. I mean, we need to be baptized, but I mean, if all you do is you get dunked in the water and then you go off and you continue to live like the rest of the world with no regard to any change in your heart, does that matter? No. You've got to change your heart. And that's what this means. It means yielding your heart to God to change from worldly nature to godly nature. So that you no longer look like or live like this world, but that you're becoming a holy people. That your nature is becoming holy as God's is. Okay, so for tonight, no evening activities. We've got evening worship at 5. No specific youth activity. Next week we've got evening worship at Willow Bend at 5 o'clock. Wednesdays, we've been doing this. Hey, we've been doing the 2 minutes of rest as we start class. I was wanting to see, do you guys want to keep doing that? Just 2 minutes, just to take it as a moment of rest. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good. We're gonna do it. So, yeah. And I already did the thing about the prayer board. So, I love you guys. I think you're awesome, and I really do appreciate you guys. I mean, just for those of you guys that went this week, as a reminder to me that just how awesome you guys are, the way that you guys behave and everything. So, appreciate you guys.
You're welcome.
Is that good? Good. Yeah. Good job. I don't.